Clara Whitmore's knees hit the frozen ground. 5 children huddled behind her in the blowing snow. The eviction notice crumpled in her fist. 3 days. They'd given her 3 days to leave the only home her babies had ever known. She looked up at the gray December sky and whispered the only prayer she had left. Please, not my children. Take everything else, but not them. If you want to know how one desperate mother found salvation in the most unexpected place, subscribe to our channel and watch until the end. Comment your city below so I can see how far this story travels. The letter had arrived at noon. Clara read it 3 times, her hands trembling so badly the words blurred together. Foreclosure, immediate. Vacate premises within 72 hours. 72 hours. She folded the paper carefully, tucked it into her apron pocket, and walked back into the kitchen where her 5 children sat waiting for lunch. Mama? Josephine looked up from the bread she was slicing. At 12, Josie had her father's sharp eyes and her mother's stubborn jaw. What did Mr. Patterson want? Nothing important, sweetheart. The lie tasted like ash. You're lying. Josie set down the knife. Your hands are shaking. Clara tucked them behind her back. Just cold. Finish the bread. Mama, I'm not a child anymore. I know when something's wrong. Clara looked at her eldest daughter, this girl who'd become half-mother to her siblings since Thomas died. 12 years old, with the weight of the world already pressing on her shoulders. She deserved the truth, but not yet, not in front of the little ones. After lunch, Clara said quietly. You and I will talk after lunch. The meal was silent except for Ruthie's babbling. At 3 years old, she was the only one who didn't sense the tension crackling through the small kitchen. Margaret picked at her potato soup, her book forgotten beside her plate. At 10, Maggie was the sensitive one, the child who cried when butterflies died and wrote poems about her father's empty chair. Mama, is someone coming to visit? Maggie asked suddenly. Why do you ask? You keep looking at the door. Clara forced herself to stop. No, sweetheart. No one's coming. Samuel slammed down his spoon. Can I go check on the horses after lunch? May I? Clara corrected automatically. May I go check on the horses? Yes, but take your coat. And don't go past the fence line, I know. At 8 years old, Sam was all restless energy and desperate need. He needed a father's firm hand, a man's guidance. All Clara could give him was warnings and worry. Eleanor said nothing. She never said much anymore. At 6, Ellie had watched her father's coffin lowered into frozen ground and hadn't spoken a full sentence for 3 months afterward. Even now, 2 years later, she communicated mostly in nods and whispers. Ellie, honey, eat your soup. Ellie shook her head. 3 more bites. 3 tiny sips. Then Ellie pushed the bowl away and pressed herself against Clara's side. Clara stroked her daughter's hair and tried to memorize the feeling. In 72 hours, she might not have a table to sit at, a kitchen to cook in, a home to keep her children safe. 72 hours. God help her. After lunch, Clara sent the younger children to their room for rest time. Ruthie went willingly, clutching her rag doll. Maggie carried a book. Sam complained, but obeyed when Clara's voice sharpened. Ellie simply followed, shadow silent. Josie remained at the kitchen table, arms crossed. Tell me. Clara sat down across from her daughter. She pulled the letter from her pocket and slid it across the worn wood. Josie read it. Her face went white. Foreclosure? Yes. But Papa paid for this land. He worked for it. He died for it. He also borrowed against it. Clara's voice came out flat, drained of emotion. She'd already spent her tears on Thomas Whitmore. 3 years of tears soaking into her pillow every night while her children slept. When he died, the payments stopped. I've been managing, But the drought last summer, then the cattle sickness in fall. How much? Josie's voice cracked. How much do we owe? More than I can pay. How much, Mama? Clara closed her eyes. $347. The number hung between them like a death sentence. That's years of work, Josie whispered. That's impossible. Yes. What are we going to do? Clara had been asking herself that question since noon. She'd run through every option, every possibility, every desperate scheme. They all ended the same way. I don't know yet. There has to be something. Someone who can help. What about Uncle Daniel? Clara's jaw tightened at the mention of her brother-in-law. The good Reverend Daniel Whitmore had made his feelings very clear after Thomas died. A widow with 5 children was a burden best managed by marrying her off to the first man willing to take on such a load, preferably himself. Your uncle has his own concerns. He's family. Family with conditions. Clara reached across the table and took Josie's hand. Listen to me. I need you to keep this from the others for now. Maggie will fall apart. Sam will do something reckless. Ellie will stop talking again. Josie finished the thought. I know. Can you do that? Can you help me protect them until I figure something out? Josie's chin lifted. That stubborn jaw so like Thomas's, so like Clara's own. I can do anything for this family, Mama. You know that. Clara squeezed her hand. I know, sweetheart. I know. That night, after the children were asleep, Clara sat by the dying fire and counted her options. Sell the cattle. The 20 head remaining might bring $60. Maybe $70 if she found the right buyer. Sell the horses. The 5 horses were worth more, perhaps $100 total, but without horses, they couldn't work the land. Couldn't travel. Couldn't survive. Sell the furniture. What little they had might bring $20, maybe $30. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. The fire crackled. The wind howled outside. And Clara Whitmore, for the first time since her husband's death, allowed herself to consider the unthinkable. The children's home in Helena. She'd heard about it. A place where orphans were cared for, educated, given a chance at life. It wasn't meant for children with living parents, but exceptions were made. Sometimes, 5 children, 4 girls and a boy. Someone would want them, wouldn't they? Someone with money and space and resources? Clara didn't have. Her stomach lurched. She stumbled to the door, threw it open, and vomited into the snow. The cold hit her like a slap. She fell to her knees, dry heaving tears freezing on her cheeks. No. She said it out loud to the snow, to the sky, to God if he was listening. No, I will not give up my children. I will die first. She meant it. The question was whether dying would save them or doom them. Morning came too bright and too cold. Clara had slept perhaps an hour, and that hour had been filled with nightmares. Thomas's face pale in death. Her children crying, reaching for her as strangers pulled them away. The creak of the gallows. That last image made no sense, but nightmares rarely did. She rose before dawn, dressed in her warmest clothes, and began preparing breakfast. The children would need their strength today. They all would. Mama! Maggie appeared in the kitchen doorway, still in her nightgown, book clutched to her chest. You're crying. Clara touched her face, wet. She hadn't realized. Just tired, sweetheart. Go get dressed. The book Papa gave me, before he died. Maggie held it up. A small volume of poetry worn at the edges. I was reading it last night. There's a poem about winter. Is there? It says, the winter comes, the frozen rut is bound beneath the clod. The snowdrift heaps against the hut. Maggie's voice wavered. And even then, there comes a God. Clara stared at her daughter. Do you believe that, Mama? That God comes even in winter? Clara thought about the foreclosure notice, the empty bank account, the $347 she could never pay. She thought about the children's home in Helena and the nightmare that had woken her in a cold sweat. "I have to believe it," she said finally. "I don't have anything else." Maggie crossed the kitchen and wrapped her thin arms around Clara's waist. "Then I'll believe it too. For both of us." Clara held her daughter and let herself cry. By mid-morning, the news had spread. In a town like Silver Creek, news always spread. Clara didn't know who'd talked Mr. Patterson at the bank perhaps, or one of his clerks, but by the time she walked into Henderson's general store, she could feel the eyes on her. Pity, judgment, satisfaction. That last one came from Victoria Harding, who stood at the counter in her fine blue dress, her perfectly styled hair, her expensive gloves. Victoria had been circling Clara's troubles like a vulture for months. "Mrs. Whitmore." Victoria's smile was sugar over poison. "I heard the news. Such a shame." Clara kept her voice steady. "I don't know what news you mean, Mrs. Harding." "The foreclosure, of course. The whole town is talking about it." Victoria moved closer, lowering her voice as if sharing a confidence. "I want you to know I'm here to help." "Help?" "The bank is willing to offer a generous settlement. If you sign over the land willingly, they'll forgive the remaining debt. You could leave with your dignity intact." Clara's hands curled into fists inside her pockets. "Leave and go where—" "Well, that's your concern, isn't it?" Victoria's eyes glittered. "Though I hear the children's home in Helena has excellent facilities, very clean, very organized." The suggestion hung in the air like smoke. Clara stepped forward. Her voice dropped to a whisper only Victoria could hear. "If you ever speak about my children again, Mrs. Harding, I will forget that I am a Christian woman. I will forget that I am a widow who depends on this town's goodwill. I will remember only that I am a mother with nothing left to lose. Do you understand me?" Victoria's smile faltered. "Just for a moment." "There's no need for threats, Mrs. Whitmore. I'm simply offering practical advice." "Your advice is noted." Clara turned away. "And rejected." She walked out of the store without buying anything. She couldn't afford it anyway. The children knew something was wrong. Sam had grown quieter, his restless energy turning inward. Maggie had stopped reading and started watching. Watching Clara's face, watching the road, watching the horizon as if waiting for something terrible to appear. Ellie had climbed into Clara's lap after dinner and refused to move. Only Ruthie remained oblivious, playing with her ragdoll singing nonsense songs, asking for stories about princesses and ponies. Clara told her stories until her voice went hoarse. That night, after the little ones were asleep, Josie found Clara by the fire again. "I heard what Mrs. Harding said." Clara looked up. "You were there?" "I followed you. I was worried." Josie sat down across from her mother. "What are we going to do?" "I'm still figuring that out." "Mama," Josie's voice was firm, "I'm 12. I can work. There are families who need help with laundry, with cooking, with children. If I found a position—" "No." "But, no." Clara's voice cracked. "I will not send my 12-year-old daughter to work as a servant so we can keep a roof over our heads. I will not let you sacrifice your childhood because I couldn't—" She stopped. "Because I failed." "You didn't fail." "Didn't I?" Clara laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Your father trusted me to keep this family together, to keep this land, and I've lost everything." "You haven't lost us." The simple words hit Clara like a physical blow. She covered her face with her hands. "Not yet," she whispered. "Not yet." Day 2 of 72 hours. Clara spent the morning writing letters. To distant relatives who'd never written back. To old friends in Boston who'd probably forgotten she existed. To anyone anywhere who might have the means and the mercy to help. She had no stamps, no money for stamps. The letters sat in a pile on her desk, useless. Sam came running in at noon, breathless and red-cheeked. "Mama, there's a wagon coming." Clara's heart seized. Already, they still had a day left. "It ain't from town," Sam continued. "It's from the Dawson place. That big ranch on the other side of the ridge." Clara frowned. The Dawson ranch had sat empty for years, ever since old Mr. Dawson died, and his son never returned from Texas. What business could anyone from there have with her, "Stay inside with your sisters"? But, "Samuel," he went. Clara grabbed her shawl and stepped onto the porch. The wagon was approaching slowly through the snow, pulled by two massive draft horses. A single figure sat on the driver's seat, a man tall and broad-shouldered, his hat pulled low against the cold. He brought the wagon to a stop 10 feet from her porch, didn't get down, just sat there looking at her. "Mrs. Whitmore." His voice was deep quiet with the careful pronunciation of someone who'd learned to speak precisely. "Who's asking?" "Elijah Dawson." A pause. "I understand you're having some difficulties." Clara's spine stiffened. "My difficulties are none of your concern, Mr. Dawson." "They might be." He climbed down from the wagon, moving with the easy grace of a man comfortable in his body. As he approached, Clara saw his face clearly for the first time. He was perhaps 38, maybe 40. Dark hair going gray at the temples. Brown eyes that seemed to see too much. A small scar on his chin. "I heard about the foreclosure," he said. "I'm here with a proposition. I don't accept charity." "This isn't charity." He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded paper. "This is a business arrangement." Clara didn't take the paper. "What kind of arrangement?" "The bank holds a note on your property, $347 plus interest. I'll pay it." Clara's breath caught. "Why?" "In exchange, you'll sign over half your water rights to my ranch." He held out the paper. "It's all detailed here. My lawyer in Helena drew it up." "Half my water rights." "Your creek runs across both our properties. I need guaranteed access for my cattle." Clara stared at him. The offer was almost too good. Pay off her debt, keep her land, keep her children, all for water rights she barely used anyway. There had to be a catch. "Why come to me with this?" she asked. "Why not just buy the property from the bank after they foreclose?" Something flickered in his eyes. "Because Victoria Harding plans to buy it. And I don't particularly like Victoria Harding." Clara almost laughed. Almost. "So this is spite. This is business." But the corner of his mouth twitched. "Spite is just a pleasant addition." She should say yes. Every rational part of her brain screamed to take the offer, sign the paper, save her family. But Clara Whitmore hadn't survived 3 years as a widow by trusting strangers with convenient solutions. "I need to think about it." His eyebrows rose slightly. "You have until tomorrow morning before the bank finalizes the foreclosure. Then I'll have my answer by tomorrow morning." He studied her for a long moment. Whatever he saw seemed to satisfy him. "Fair enough." He touched his hat brim. "I'll return at dawn, Mrs. Whitmore." He climbed back onto his wagon, turned the horses, and drove away, without another word. Clara stood on the porch, the folded paper still in his hand, and tried to figure out what had just happened. "You're going to say yes, right?" Josie stood in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed. She'd clearly been listening. "I told you to stay inside." "I was inside. I was inside by the window." Josie moved closer. "Mama, he's offering to save us. Why are you hesitating?" "Because nothing is free, Josephine. Men don't ride up to struggling widows and offer to pay their debts out of the goodness of their hearts." He said it was for water rights. Maybe. Clara looked down at the paper in her hands. Or maybe there's something else he wants. Like what? Clara didn't answer. She was thinking of all the men who'd approached her since Thomas died. The proposals wrapped in practicality. the offers of protection that came with expectations, the eyes that lingered too long on a widow with no one to defend her. Elijah Dawson had looked at her differently. He'd looked at her like she was a problem to be solved, not a prize to be won. She wasn't sure if that was better or worse. "I'm going to read this contract," Clara said finally. "Every word. And tomorrow morning when Mr. Dawson returns, I'll have questions." "And if his answers are good?" Clara met her daughter's eyes. "Then I'll sign. And we'll stay." Josie's shoulders dropped with relief. "Thank God. Thank him after we have the deed in our hands, not before." Clara read the contract 3 times by candlelight. It was straightforward, almost suspiciously so. Elijah Dawson would pay the $347 owed to the bank plus any accrued interest. In exchange, Clara would grant permanent access to the creek running through her property, allowing Dawson cattle to water there year-round. No hidden clauses, no conditions about marriage or companionship, no references to her children at all. It was, as far as Clara could tell, exactly what he'd said, a business arrangement. So why did her instincts keep screaming that something was wrong? She fell asleep with the contract on her chest and dreamed of Thomas. He stood in a field of snow smiling at her the way he had on their wedding day. But when she ran toward him, he held up his hand. "Not yet, Clara." His voice echoed strangely. "You've got more living to do first." "I'm tired of living." The words came out before she could stop them. "I'm tired of fighting alone." "You're not alone." He gestured behind her. Clara turned and saw her children, all 5 of them, standing in a row. Josie holding Ruthie, Maggie clutching her book, Sam standing tall, Ellie hiding behind her siblings, watching with those 2 old eyes. "They need you," Thomas said. "More than they need me now. I don't know how to save them." "You don't have to do it alone." Thomas's image was fading, dissolving into the snow. "Someone's coming, Clara. Let him help." "Who, the rancher? I don't even know him." "You will." And then he was gone, and Clara woke with tears freezing on her face and the first gray light of dawn creeping through the window. Elijah Dawson arrived at exactly sunrise. Clara was waiting on the porch, the contract in one hand, a list of questions in the other. "You're prompt," she said. "I don't waste time, mine or anyone else's." He stepped down from the wagon and approached the porch. "Have you read it?" 3 times. "And I have questions." "I expected you would." Clara looked down at her list. "Why are you really doing this?" "I told you. Water rights." "You have your own water." "The Dawson property has 3 creeks and a natural spring. I remember because my husband used to complain about it." Elijah's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. "Your husband complained. He said it wasn't fair. That your father had more water than he could use while the rest of us scraped by on seasonal creeks." Clara folded her list. "So I'll ask again. Why do you need my water rights?" For a long moment, Elijah said nothing. He looked past her toward the house, toward the barn, toward the snow-covered fields that had been Thomas Whitmore's dream. "My father helped your husband buy this land." Clara blinked. "What?" 20 years ago. Thomas Whitmore was a young man with ambition and no capital. My father loaned him the money for his first 100 acres. Elijah's voice was flat, emotionless. "When your husband died, that debt should have passed to you. But my father forgave it." "I never knew about any loan." "You weren't supposed to. My father made Thomas promise never to tell you. He didn't want the weight of it on your shoulders." Clara's mind raced. "If the debt was forgiven, then why?" "Because my father is dead now." Elijah cut her off. "And I'm cleaning up his affairs. There was no loan on the books, no official record. Just a letter in his desk explaining what he'd done." "Why would your father help my husband? They barely knew each other." Elijah's jaw tightened. For the first time, Clara saw something crack in his careful composure. "My father knew your mother, Mrs. Whitmore. Years ago, before either of them married. He never forgot her." A pause. When he found out her daughter had come to Montana, had married a struggling rancher, had built a life here. He wanted to help, anonymously. Clara felt like the ground was shifting beneath her feet. "You're saying your father loved my mother." "I'm saying my father never stopped loving your mother. And because of that, he made sure her daughter would have a chance at the life he couldn't give her. But that was 20 years ago. Why are you here now?" Elijah met her eyes directly. "Because Victoria Harding is about to take everything my father protected. Because I spent 10 years running from Montana and everything my father built. And because—" He stopped. "Because I'm tired of watching good people lose while vultures like Victoria win." Clara studied his face. The hard lines, the tired eyes, the jaw set against feeling too much. "This isn't just business," she said slowly. "This is personal." "Everything worth doing is personal, Mrs. Whitmore." She should have more questions. She should demand proof documentation, something concrete. But standing there in the cold morning light, looking into the eyes of a man who'd just given her more truth than anyone had in 3 years. Clara made a decision. "I'll sign your contract, Mr. Dawson, but I have one condition." "Name it." "No more secrets. If there's anything else you're not telling me about my family, about my land, about why you're really here, I want to know. Now." Elijah was silent for a long moment. The wind cut between them sharp with winter. "There's one more thing," he said finally. "Your husband didn't die in a riding accident, Mrs. Whitmore. He was murdered." Clara's world went white. She was falling. No, she was sitting. Someone had caught her, guided her to the porch steps. Elijah's voice came from far away. "Breathe. Just breathe." "Murdered." The word came out strangled. "You're saying Thomas was murdered." "I'm saying his death wasn't an accident." "Who?" Clara's hands were shaking. Her whole body was shaking. "Who killed my husband?" Elijah crouched in front of her, his face level with hers. "I don't know yet, but I intend to find out." "How do you know this? How can you possibly—" "My father left letters. Not just about the loan, about everything. He'd been watching over your family for years, even after your mother died. When Thomas died, my father hired someone to investigate. The report was inconclusive, but there were questions." "What kind of questions?" "The horse that threw him was calm, well-trained. Your husband was an expert rider. And there was a witness, a drifter passing through, who said he saw another rider on the ridge that day. Someone who left in a hurry right before the accident." Clara's mind was reeling. 3 years. For 3 years she'd believed her husband died because of bad luck, because of a spooked horse, because God was cruel and random and took good men for no reason. But if it wasn't random, why didn't your father tell me? He tried. Elijah's voice was quiet. "He came to see you 3 months after the funeral. Do you remember?" Clara thought back. That first terrible year was mostly a blur, but she remembered an old man at her door. Distinguished, kind eyes. She'd been so lost in grief she'd barely registered what he said. He said he was sorry for my loss, that he wanted to help. Her voice cracked. I told him I didn't need charity and closed the door in his face. He died 2 months later. Heart attack. Elijah stood. I found his letters 6 months ago when I came back to settle the estate. I've been investigating since then. And you didn't think to come to me sooner? I didn't have enough evidence. I still don't. His jaw tightened. But I have suspicions. Who? Elijah looked toward town, toward the bank, toward Victoria Harding's fine house on the hill. Your husband's land isn't just dirt and grass, Mrs. Whitmore. There's something under it. My father's letters mention mineral surveys, talk of potential value. Someone knew about that before Thomas did. Victoria. Her husband was a surveyor before he died. He would have had access to geological reports. Clara's grief was transforming. She could feel it happening, the soft, aching sorrow hardening into something sharper. Anger. Rage. She's been circling me for months, waiting for me to fail, trying to buy my land. Her voice was ice. And now you're telling me she might have killed my husband to get it. I'm telling you there are questions worth asking. Elijah offered his hand. And I'm telling you, I'm going to find answers, with or without your help. Clara looked at his hand, then at his face, then at the house behind her where 5 children slept, trusting their mother to keep them safe. She took his hand and stood. With, she said, definitely with. The contract was signed at noon. Elijah rode to town with Clara beside him on the wagon seat. They walked into the bank together, laid the money on Mr. Patterson's desk, and watched his face fall. Mrs. Whitmore. His voice was strained. I wasn't expecting. The debt is paid. Clara kept her voice steady. In full. With interest. Patterson looked at the money, then at Elijah, then back at Clara. His hands trembled slightly as he counted. This appears to be in order. He sounded like he was choking. I'll need to process the paperwork. File the appropriate. By end of business today, Elijah cut in. Mrs. Whitmore will have her deed free and clear before sundown. That's highly irregular. So is foreclosing on a widow 3 days before Christmas. Elijah leaned forward. Get it done, Patterson. The banker's face went red, but he nodded. They walked out of the bank together. The whole town seemed to be watching, shopkeepers in doorways, women at windows, men pausing in the street. And standing on the steps of the general store, face white with fury, was Victoria Harding. Mrs. Whitmore, Victoria's voice carried across the street. I see you found yourself a benefactor. Clara stopped, turned, met Victoria's eyes. I've found a business partner, Mrs. Harding, nothing more. How fortunate for you. Victoria descended the steps, her fine blue dress dragging through the snow. I hope you know what you're getting into. Mr. Dawson's reputation in Texas is colorful. I'm aware of my reputation. Elijah's voice was calm. Most of it's even true. Including the part about your father disinheriting you, about how you abandoned him for 10 years while he wasted away alone. Clara felt Elijah stiffen beside her, but his voice remained steady. Including that part. Victoria smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. Just thought Mrs. Whitmore should know the kind of man she's dealing with. She turned and walked back into the store without another word. Clara looked at Elijah. His face had gone carefully blank. Is it true your father disinherited you? He wrote it in a letter. Never made it legal. A pause. We had differences. What kind of differences? The kind that make a 20-year-old leave home and not come back. Elijah climbed onto the wagon. We should go. Your children will be worried. Clara climbed up beside him. But she wasn't done. You said no more secrets. I said no more secrets about your family. He snapped the reins. The horses began to move. My family is my own business. They rode in silence for a long time. The children were waiting on the porch when they returned. Josie had clearly been keeping watch, and her face flooded with relief when she saw Clara. Behind her, Maggie and Sam pressed against the railing. Ellie hid behind the door, only one eye visible, and Ruthie was running. Mama! The 3-year-old launched herself off the porch, hit the snow, and kept coming. Clara barely had time to climb down from the wagon before 40 pounds of toddler slammed into her legs. Mama, you were gone forever. Just a few hours, sweetheart. That's forever. Ruthie's arms tightened. Then she noticed Elijah. Her eyes went wide. Who's the big man? Elijah looked down at the child. Something shifted in his face, a softening Clara hadn't seen before. "I'm Elijah." His voice was gentler than she'd heard it. "I'm your neighbor." "We don't have neighbors." Ruthie's forehead crinkled. "Mama says we're all alone out here." "Not anymore." Josie had reached them now, Maggie close behind. Sam hung back on the porch, arms crossed, trying to look tough. Ellie had disappeared entirely. "Mama!" Josie's voice was tight. "What happened?" Clara took a deep breath. "Children, this is Mr. Dawson. He's going to help us keep the farm." "How?" Sam's voice was suspicious. "It's a business arrangement." Clara looked at Elijah. "Mr. Dawson needs access to our creek for his cattle. In exchange, he's helped pay our debts." "Why would he do that?" Sam challenged. "Because sometimes people help each other." Clara's voice was firm. "That's what neighbors do." Maggie stepped forward, her book clutched against her chest like armor. "Are you staying for supper, Mr. Dawson?" Elijah hesitated. He looked at Clara. "You're welcome to stay," Clara heard herself say. "It's the least I can do." "I don't want to impose." "You just saved our home. Imposing is the last thing you're doing." Another long pause. Then Elijah nodded. "Thank you, Mrs. Whitmore. I'd be honored." Ruthie grabbed his hand. "You can sit next to me." "Ruthie," Clara started. "No, she's fine." Was that almost a smile on Elijah's face? "Lead the way, Miss Ruthie." The 3-year-old pulled the tall rancher toward the house, chattering about her rag doll and her favorite songs, and the snow angels she was going to make later. Clara watched them go, something strange twisting in her chest. Josie appeared at her elbow. "Mama." "Yes, I think I like him." Clara watched Elijah bend down to listen to something Ruthie was saying. He nodded seriously, as if the toddler's words were the most important thing in the world. "Don't get ahead of yourself," Clara said. But something in her heart was already running. Supper was chaos. Clara had grown used to managing 5 children around her small table, but adding Elijah Dawson to the mix threw everything off balance. He was too big for the chair Ruthie had insisted he use. His shoulders seemed to take up half the room, and every time he moved, 4 pairs of eyes followed him like he was some exotic creature who'd wandered in from the wild. Ellie hadn't come down at all. "She does that," Josie explained quietly, passing the bread. "When strangers are here. She hides until they leave." "I'm not a stranger anymore," Elijah said. "I'm a neighbor." "You're still new." New is the same as strange to Ellie. Clara watched the exchange with something like wonder. Josie, her guarded, protective Josie, was speaking to Elijah without hostility. That alone was remarkable. "Mr. Dawson," Maggie said suddenly, "do you like books?" Elijah paused with his fork halfway to his mouth. "Some books." "Which ones?" "Maggie," Clara warned. "Let the man eat." "It's all right." Elijah set down his fork. "I like books about history, about how things were built, about people who made something from nothing." Maggie's face lit up. "I like poetry." "Do you now?" "Papa used to read it to me, before he died." The words came out matter of fact, the way children sometimes spoke about devastating things. "Mama reads to us now, but it's not the same." Clara's throat tightened. "Poetry's important," Elijah said carefully. "It teaches us to feel things we might not have words for otherwise." "That's what Papa said." Maggie tilted her head. "Did you know him? Our Papa?" "I knew of him. My father spoke highly of Thomas Whitmore." "Everyone speaks highly of dead people," Sam muttered. "Samuel." Clara's voice was sharp. "It's true. When Papa was alive, people called him stubborn and foolish for trying to ranch this land. Now that he's dead, suddenly he was brave and ambitious." Sam stabbed at his potato. "Dead people get to be heroes. Living people just get to be problems." The table went silent. Elijah leaned forward slightly. "You're angry." So what if I am? So nothing. Anger's honest. Better than pretending everything's fine when it isn't. Sam looked up startled. No adult had ever validated his anger before. Clara watched the exchange with a complicated mix of feelings. I ain't pretending, Sam said, but his voice had lost its edge. Good, don't start. Elijah picked up his fork again. World's got enough pretenders. The rest of the meal passed in relative peace. Ruthie chattered about everything and nothing. Maggie asked more questions about books. Sam remained quiet but watchful, studying Elijah like he was trying to solve a puzzle. And Josie. Josie kept glancing at her mother with knowing eyes. After supper, Clara walked Elijah to his wagon. The night had turned bitter, the stars sharp as broken glass overhead. Thank you, she said, for everything today. The debt, the contract, dinner. You don't need to thank me. Yes, I do. Clara pulled her shawl tighter. You didn't have to tell me about Thomas, about your father. You could have just paid the debt and walked away. Would you have trusted me if I had? No. Then I made the right choice. He climbed onto the wagon seat and gathered the reins. I'll be back tomorrow. There are things we need to discuss. Things I couldn't say in front of the children. About the investigation. About what happens next. He looked down at her, his face half-shadowed in the starlight. Get some rest, Mrs. Whitmore. You're going to need it. He drove away into the darkness, and Clara stood watching until the wagon disappeared over the ridge. When she turned back to the house, Ellie was standing in the doorway. Mama! Clara's heart clenched. It was the first word Ellie had spoken all day. Yes, sweetheart? Is the big man going to come back? Yes. Tomorrow. Ellie considered this. Her small face was impossible to read. Good, she said finally. And then she disappeared back into the house. Clara stood frozen on the porch, trying to understand what had just happened. Good. From Ellie, who trusted no one, who hid from everyone, who hadn't called anything good since before her father died. Clara looked up at the stars and wondered what Thomas would think of all this, a stranger paying their debts, a mystery surrounding his death, their children slowly, carefully letting someone new into their fortress of grief. I don't know what I'm doing, she whispered to the sky, but I'm trying. I hope that's enough. The stars didn't answer. They never did. The next morning brought fresh snow and fresh trouble. Clara was feeding the chickens when she heard the wagon approaching, but it wasn't Elijah's wagon. This one was smaller, lighter, pulled by a single horse that picked its way carefully through the drifts. Reverend Daniel Whitmore climbed down before the wagon fully stopped. Clara. Daniel. She kept her voice neutral. This is unexpected. I heard about yesterday. He walked toward her, his preacher's coat flapping in the wind. The whole town is talking about it. Elijah Dawson paying your debts, riding into the bank like some kind of hero. He's not a hero. He's a businessman. Is that what he told you? That's what I observed. Daniel stopped a few feet away. He was handsome, in a soft way, with Thomas's coloring, but none of his brother's strength. Where Thomas had been granite, Daniel was sandstone, pleasant enough to look at, but liable to crumble under pressure. Clara, I need to speak with you. Privately. The children are inside. Then we'll talk in the barn. She didn't want to. Every instinct screamed against being alone with Daniel, against giving him any opportunity to press his case. But refusing would only make things worse. 5 minutes. The barn was cold, smelling of hay and horse and the particular mustiness of winter. Clara stood near the door, arms crossed, making it clear she had no intention of settling in. Say what you came to say, Daniel. I'm worried about you. You've been worried about me for 3 years. It hasn't changed anything. This is different. Daniel moved closer. Elijah Dawson is not a good man, Clara. I've heard stories from Texas. He was involved in some kind of land dispute that turned violent. People died. People die in land disputes all the time out here. That doesn't make him a murderer. Does it make him trustworthy? More trustworthy than a bank that tried to take my home 3 days before Christmas. Daniel's jaw tightened. You're being deliberately difficult. I'm being realistic. Mr. Dawson offered me a business arrangement. I accepted. That's all. Is it? He stepped closer still. Too close. Clara, you're a widow with 5 children. You can't afford to be naive about men's intentions. What intentions do you imagine he has? The same intentions any man would have when looking at you. Daniel's voice dropped. You're still beautiful, Clara. Still desirable. A man like Dawson doesn't help a woman like you out of pure charity. Clara felt her skin crawl. A woman like me. Vulnerable. Desperate. Alone. I'm not desperate. Her voice came out harder than she intended. And I'm not alone. I have my children. Children need a father. They had a father. He died. Exactly. Daniel reached for her hand. She pulled it back. Clara, I've been patient. I've given you time to grieve, time to adjust. But you can't keep living like this, struggling, suffering, barely surviving, when there's a perfectly good solution right in front of you. You mean marriage? I mean family. I mean security. I mean a man who will provide for you and your children, who will give them his name and his protection. Daniel's eyes were bright with something that might have been passion or might have been possession. I've loved you since before Thomas married you. You know that. Clara's stomach turned. You were his brother. I'm still his brother, and I'm offering to do what he would have wanted to take care of his family. Thomas would have wanted me to take care of myself. Thomas was a dreamer. He didn't understand how the world really works. Daniel's voice sharpened. Look where his dreams got you, Clara. A failing ranch, a mountain of debt, 5 children you can barely feed. Is that the legacy you want to honor? Something snapped inside her. Get out. Clara, I said get out. She moved to the barn door and threw it open. Cold air rushed in. I don't need your protection, Daniel. I don't need your charity. And I certainly don't need your criticism of my dead husband. I'm trying to help you. You're trying to help yourself. Clara's voice was ice. You've been waiting 3 years for me to break. Waiting for me to come crawling to you grateful and defeated. Well, I won't. I will never be grateful for your particular brand of help. Daniel's face went red. You're making a mistake. Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. Elijah Dawson will destroy you. He destroys everything he touches. Then I'll be destroyed on my own terms. Clara pointed toward his wagon. Leave Daniel, and don't come back unless you're invited. He left. Clara stood in the barn doorway shaking, watching his wagon disappear down the road. She didn't know if she'd just made an ally into an enemy or simply revealed what he'd always been. Either way, there was no going back now. Elijah arrived at noon. He took one look at Clara's face and said, What happened? Daniel Whitmore came to visit. The Reverend Thomas's brother. The same. Clara led him inside. The children were doing lessons at the kitchen table, Josie supervising as always. He had concerns about our arrangement. I imagine he did. He also had concerns about you. Clara lowered her voice. He said there was violence in Texas. A land dispute. People died. Elijah's expression didn't change. That's true. Care to elaborate? Not particularly. He glanced at the children. But I will. Later, when we have privacy. I'm running low on later, Mr. Dawson. I need to know who I'm dealing with. You're dealing with a man who keeps his word. He met her eyes directly. Whatever else you hear about me, and you'll hear plenty, remember that. I don't make promises I can't keep. Clara studied his face, looking for deception, for hidden motives, for any sign that she was making a catastrophic mistake. She found nothing but tired honesty. All right, she said finally. Later then. They spent the afternoon working. Elijah had brought tools and lumber from his ranch. He repaired the sagging barn door, fixed the leak in the chicken coop roof, and reinforced the fence around the pig pen. Sam followed him everywhere, silent but watchful, handing tools when asked, listening to everything. Clara watched from the house, trying to keep the younger children occupied, while her mind raced through possibilities. Thomas was murdered. The words kept circling back, demanding attention. Someone had killed her husband. Someone had made her a widow, made her children orphans, turned her life into a daily battle for survival. And that someone might be Victoria Harding. "Mama," Maggie appeared at her elbow. "Why do you keep looking out the window? I'm watching Mr. Dawson work." "Why?" "Because I want to make sure he does it right." "Josie says you're watching him because you like him." Clara's cheeks flushed. "Josie says too much." "Do you like him?" "I barely know him." "But do you like what you know?" Clara looked at her 10-year-old daughter with her two wise eyes and her poet's heart. "I don't know yet, sweetheart. Ask me again in a week." "That's what you always say." "Then maybe you should stop asking." Maggie smiled, a real smile, the first one Clara had seen in months. "I like him. He talks to me like I'm a real person, not just a child." "You are a real person. Most grown-ups don't seem to think so." Clara pulled her daughter close. "Mr. Dawson is different. Different good or different bad? I'm still figuring that out." By late afternoon, Elijah had finished his repairs, and Sam had transformed from suspicious to grudgingly impressed. The boy wouldn't admit it out loud, but Clara saw the way he looked at Elijah, like a puzzle finally coming together. "He knows things," Sam reported at dinner. "Real things, about horses and fences and how to fix stuff. Papa knew things too, but different things, dreamy things." "Your father was a visionary," Clara said. "Mr. Dawson says Papa was brave for trying to build something out here. He says most men wouldn't have had the guts." Clara looked across the table at Elijah, who was carefully pretending not to listen. "Did he say anything else?" "He said guts don't always win, but they matter anyway." After dinner, when the children were settled, Clara and Elijah finally had their private conversation. They sat on the porch despite the cold, wrapped in blankets, watching the stars emerge one by one. Clara had learned that Elijah preferred the outdoors. Something about walls made him restless. "Tell me about Texas," she said. He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was flat, recounting facts rather than feelings. "I left Montana when I was 20. My father and I had a disagreement about my future. He wanted me to stay, take over the ranch, become him. I wanted something different." "What did you want?" "To prove I could build something on my own. Without his money, without his name, without his shadow hanging over everything." Elijah stared at the sky. "So, I went to Texas. Started with nothing. Worked cattle drives, saved every penny, eventually bought a small piece of land outside San Antonio." "That sounds admirable." "It was foolish. The land I bought was part of a larger dispute. Two families had been fighting over water rights for generations. I didn't know that when I bought it. By the time I found out, I was already caught in the middle. What happened? The elder son of one family decided I was the problem. He came to my property with 3 men. They burned my barn, scattered my cattle, put a gun to my head, and told me to leave or die." Clara's breath caught. "What did you do?" "I left." His voice was bitter. "Packed what I could carry and rode away. Told myself I was being smart. That land wasn't worth dying for." "That was smart." "No, it was cowardly." Elijah's jaw tightened. 2 weeks later, that same man did the same thing to another family. A family that didn't leave. A family that fought back. Clara's stomach dropped. "What happened?" "The father was killed. The mother and children barely escaped." He finally looked at her. "I could have stopped it. If I'd stayed, if I'd fought, if I'd done anything except run, you might have died." "Maybe." Or maybe I could have made a difference. His hands clenched on his knees. After that, I went back. Gathered some men, confronted the family that had been terrorizing the valley. There was a fight. People died. I killed 2 of them myself. The words hung in the cold air between them. Self-defense? Clara asked quietly. Justice. Elijah's voice was hard. I told myself it was justice. But looking back, I'm not sure there's a difference between justice and revenge when you're the one holding the gun. Clara thought about Thomas, about whoever had pushed him from that horse, or spooked it, or done whatever they'd done to kill him. If she knew for certain who it was, if she had a gun in her hand and that person in front of her, would she pull the trigger? A year ago, she would have said no. A week ago, she would have said no. Now, she wasn't sure. Is that why you didn't come home? She asked. After Texas. Part of it. I didn't feel like the same person who'd left. I'd killed men. I'd failed to save innocent people. I'd become something my father would have been ashamed of. Elijah shook his head. So I stayed away, built a new life in a new place, tried to forget Montana ever existed. But you came back? My father died. Simple words heavy with everything they didn't say. And when I read his letters, I realized he'd never been ashamed of me. He'd been waiting for me to figure out who I was, what I wanted, whether I could forgive myself enough to come home. Did you forgive yourself? I'm working on it. He looked at her. Coming here helping you, it's part of that. My father spent 20 years protecting your family from the shadows. I want to finish what he started. Even if it means confronting whoever killed Thomas. Especially then. Clara pulled her blanket tighter. The cold seemed to have seeped into her bones. Victoria Harding, she said. You think she was involved? I think she had motive. The mineral rights on your land could be worth a fortune. Her husband was a surveyor, he would have known. But Marcus Harding died years before Thomas. He did. And Victoria inherited all his papers, all his surveys, all his knowledge. Elijah leaned forward. Here's what I don't understand. Victoria's been trying to buy your land for months. She's been pressuring the bank, spreading rumors, doing everything she can to force you out. But she hasn't done anything illegal. Nothing that would draw attention. Isn't that good? It's suspicious. If she was willing to kill Thomas 3 years ago, why is she being so careful now? Clara thought about it. Maybe she learned her lesson. Maybe she almost got caught. Or maybe she's got someone else doing her dirty work. Elijah's eyes darkened. Someone who's been getting closer to your family. Someone who has access, opportunity, and motive. Clara's blood went cold. Daniel. I don't know for sure, but the timing bothers me. He shows up this morning right after I pay your debt, warning you against me, telling you to trust him instead. He's been doing that for 3 years. Has he? Or did it start after Thomas died? Clara tried to remember. The first year after Thomas's death was a blur of grief and survival. She couldn't recall when Daniel's visits had started, when his proposals had begun, when his attention had shifted from brotherly concern to something more possessive. I don't know, she admitted. I wasn't paying attention. Start paying attention. Elijah stood. I'm not saying the Reverend killed your husband. I'm saying someone did, and we need to figure out who before they decide you're a problem too. Me. Why would I be a problem? Because you're not leaving. Because I'm here now. Because whatever they wanted from Thomas's land, they might not be able to get it while you're still standing in the way. Clara rose to face him. Are you trying to frighten me? I'm trying to keep you alive. His voice softened. You and your children. That's all I want, Clara. To finish what my father started. To protect the family he couldn't. Why does my family matter so much to you? Your father loved my mother, I understand that. But you didn't even know us. Elijah was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough with something she couldn't identify. Because I know what it's like to lose everything. To stand in the ashes of your life and wonder if there's any point in rebuilding. He met her eyes. You haven't given up. After everything you've been through, you're still fighting. For your children, for your land, for your future. That kind of strength, it deserves protection. I'm not strong, I'm just stubborn. Same thing. Clara laughed. It surprised her she couldn't remember the last time she'd laughed at anything. You're a strange man, Elijah Dawson. So I've been told. He climbed onto his wagon, gathered the reins, and looked down at her one more time. I'll be back tomorrow. We need to go through your husband's papers, his letters, anything that might tell us what he knew about the land. I've been through his things 100 times. Then we'll go through them 101. Sometimes you don't see what's right in front of you until someone else points it out. He drove away into the darkness, and Clara stood watching until she couldn't see him anymore. When she turned back to the house, all 5 children were pressed against the front window watching her. She waved. They scattered like startled birds. Clara smiled despite everything and walked inside to face whatever questions were waiting for her. The questions came fast and fierce. Are you going to marry him? Josie demanded. Don't be ridiculous. It's not ridiculous. Widow Henderson married Mr. Foster after he fixed her roof. Mr. Dawson fixed our barn door. That's hardly the same thing. It's a start. Maggie tugged Clara's sleeve. I think you should marry him. He likes poetry. He said he likes history books. He said poetry is important. That's almost the same thing. Sam stood apart, arms crossed, trying to look indifferent. I don't care if you marry him or not. But if you do, can he teach me to shoot? Nobody is teaching you to shoot. Papa was going to teach me. Before he died. The words hit Clara like a punch. She reached for her son, but he pulled away. I'm not a baby mama. I should know how to protect us. You're 8 years old. Papa was 10 when he shot his first deer. He told me. Clara closed her eyes. Thomas's stories. Thomas's promises. Thomas's legacy unfinished and unfulfilled. We'll talk about it, she said finally. Not today, but we'll talk. Sam's face softened slightly. Okay. Ruthie had fallen asleep on the floor, exhausted from the excitement. Ellie had disappeared again, back to whatever hiding place she'd found. Clara gathered her littlest daughter in her arms and carried her to bed. Mama. Josie followed her into the children's room. What were you and Mr. Dawson talking about on the porch? Adult things. What kind of adult things? Clara tucked Ruthie under her blanket, smoothed her hair, and took a moment to gather her thoughts. Josie, I need to tell you something. But you can't tell the others. Not yet. Josie's face went serious. What is it? Your father's death. It might not have been an accident. The words hung in the air. Josie's face went white, then red, then white again. What do you mean? Mr. Dawson found some information. His father was investigating before he died. There are questions about what really happened that day. Questions like what? Like why your father's horse spooked when it never had before. Like why there was a stranger seen riding away from the ridge just before the accident. Like why certain people in this town have been so eager to take our land. Josie's hands were shaking. Are you saying someone killed Papa? I'm saying we don't know, not for sure, but we're trying to find out. Who? The word came out fierce, burning. Who would do that? We have suspicions, but suspicions aren't proof. Tell me who. Clara hesitated. Josie was 12, old enough to understand, too young to carry this burden. But she was also her father's daughter, stubborn, brave, unwilling to be protected from hard truths. Mrs. Harding, maybe, and possibly. Clara's voice dropped. Possibly your Uncle Daniel. Josie's face went completely blank. Uncle Daniel? We don't know for sure. It's just a possibility. He comes to church every Sunday. He preaches about God and kindness and doing the right thing. Josie's voice was rising. And you're saying he might have killed my father. I'm saying we don't know. That's why I need you to keep this secret. If the wrong person finds out we're investigating, what happens? Clara pulled her daughter close. Nothing good. So we stay quiet, we stay careful, and we let Mr. Dawson help us find the truth. Josie was trembling against her. I hate this. I hate all of it. I know, sweetheart, so do I. If Uncle Daniel really did this, if he killed Papa and then came to our house, sat at our table, acted like he cared about us, then we'll make sure he pays for it. Josie pulled back, her eyes blazing. Promise? Clara looked at her daughter, this fierce, wounded, magnificent girl who'd lost her father and found a way to keep living anyway. I promise, she said. Whatever it takes. That night, Clara dreamed of Thomas again. But this time he wasn't smiling. He stood in the barn, blood spreading across his shirt, his eyes full of something she'd never seen before, fear. Find it, he said, before they do. Find what, Thomas? What am I looking for? The proof. It's there. I hid it. Where? Tell me where. But he was fading, dissolving like smoke in the wind. The children, he whispered. Protect the children. He's closer than you think. Clara woke, gasping, heart pounding, the taste of terror in her mouth. She lay in the darkness for a long time, listening to the wind howl outside, thinking about hidden proof and dangerous secrets and a dead husband who couldn't tell her what she needed to know. Somewhere in this house, Thomas had hidden something worth killing for. And somewhere in this town, a murderer was watching, waiting, wondering if Clara would find it before they did. She didn't sleep again. Clara started searching at dawn. She began in Thomas's old study, a small room off the parlor that she'd barely entered since his death. The children knew to stay away. Mama needs her quiet time, she'd told them, and they'd accepted it without question. But the truth was simpler and more painful. She couldn't bear to sit in his chair, touch his things, breathe air that still somehow smelled like him. Now she tore through it, like a woman possessed. Drawers emptied onto the floor. Papers scattered across the desk. Books pulled from shelves and shaken, their pages fluttering like wounded birds. She didn't know what she was looking for. Thomas's ghost hadn't been specific, but she'd know it when she found it. She had to. Mama! Clara spun. Ellie stood in the doorway, her small face pale with concern. Sweetheart, I told you to stay with Josie. You're making a mess. I know. I'm looking for something. What? Clara hesitated. How did you explain to a 6-year-old that her dead father might have hidden evidence of his own murder? Something Papa left behind, she said finally. Something important. Ellie walked into the room, picking her way carefully through the scattered papers. She stopped beside Thomas's desk and pointed at the floor. There's a funny board. What? A funny board. Papa showed me once. He said it was a secret. Clara's heart stopped. She dropped to her knees beside her daughter. Show me, sweetheart. Show me which board. Ellie pointed again. Clara looked closer and saw it, a floorboard slightly different from the others. The grain running the wrong direction, the edges worn smooth from handling. Her hands shook as she pried it up. Underneath was a small metal box. Clara lifted it out with trembling fingers. The box was locked, but the lock was old and flimsy. She grabbed a letter opener from the desk and forced it open. Inside were papers, letters, and a small leather journal she'd never seen before. Ellie, Clara's voice came out strange. Go get your sister. Tell Josie to come here right now. Ellie ran. Clara began to read. The journal was Thomas's. His handwriting filled page after page, observations, suspicions, fears. The earliest entries were dated 4 years ago, more than a year before his death. Marcus Harding came to see me today, said he had information about the land, said I was sitting on something valuable and didn't even know it. Clara turned pages with shaking hands. Harding showed me the survey results. There's silver in these hills, maybe gold too. He wanted to buy my mineral rights for a pittance. I refused. His face went dark. More pages, more entries. Victoria Harding has been asking questions around town, about my finances, about my debt. She's up to something. Received an anonymous letter today. Sell the land or suffer consequences. I showed it to Sheriff Peters. He said it was probably a prank. Someone cut my fence line last night. 3 cattle got loose. By the time I found them, one had broken its leg. Had to put it down. I think someone is watching the house. I see riders on the ridge at odd hours. Clara doesn't believe me. She thinks grief over her mother's death has made me paranoid. Clara's throat tightened. She remembered those conversations. Thomas's worried face, his insistence that something was wrong. She'd dismissed him, told him he was imagining things. She'd been wrong. Mama! Josie appeared in the doorway, Ellie at her heels. Ellie said you found something. Close the door. Josie obeyed, then crossed the room to kneel beside her mother. Her eyes went wide when she saw the journal. Is that Papa's? Yes. Clara's voice cracked. He knew Josie. He knew someone was after him. He was trying to document everything. Why didn't he tell anyone? He tried. No one believed him. Clara turned to the last entry. The date was 3 days before Thomas died. Listen to this. She read aloud. I've made copies of everything. The surveys, the letters, my notes. One set goes to the bank vault in Helena. The other, I'm hiding here somewhere only my family will think to look. If something happens to me, Clara will find it. She's stubborn that way. She won't give up until she knows the truth. Josie's eyes filled with tears. He knew. He knew he was going to die. He suspected. Clara gathered the papers from the box. And he made sure we'd have proof. Proof of what? Clara held up a document. Official letterhead. Marcus Harding's signature at the bottom. This is a geological survey. It shows silver deposits on our land and on the Dawson land. It also shows that the Harding family knew about it years before anyone else. Mrs. Harding. Her husband conducted the survey. And look at this. Clara pulled out another paper. A letter from Marcus Harding to Victoria, dated a week before his death. Josie leaned closer. What does it say? Clara read, the Whitmore property is the key. If we can acquire it before anyone discovers the silver, we'll be wealthy beyond imagination. Thomas refuses to sell. We may need to pursue alternative methods. Alternative methods, Josie whispered. That means they were planning something, even then. Clara's mind was racing. Marcus Harding had died in a mining accident 2 years before Thomas. At the time, everyone assumed it was bad luck, dangerous work, unstable conditions. But what if it wasn't an accident? What if Victoria had eliminated her own husband to keep the secret? What if she'd then turned her attention to Thomas, the only other person who knew about the silver mama? Josie's voice was urgent. We need to show this to Mr. Dawson. I know. Now. We need to show him now. Clara looked at her daughter. 12 years old and already thinking like a strategist. You're right. Stay here with the children. Don't let anyone in. If your Uncle Daniel comes, I'll tell him you're sick and can't see visitors. Good girl. Clara gathered the papers, shoved them into her coat, and ran for the barn. Elijah arrived before she'd finished saddling her horse. His wagon crested the ridge just as Clara was tightening the cinch, and he must have seen the urgency in her movements because he drove the horses faster, snow spraying from the wheels. What happened? He was off the wagon before it fully stopped. Are the children? They're fine. I found something. Clara pulled the papers from her coat. Thomas hid them, under the floorboards. He knew Elijah. He knew everything. Elijah took the papers with careful hands. His face went still as he read, then dark, then something that looked like cold fury. The survey, he said quietly. I suspected, but this is proof. There's more. Clara handed him the letter from Marcus to Victoria. They were planning it together, years ago. Elijah read the letter twice. When he looked up, his eyes were hard. Marcus Harding died in a mining accident. I know. Victoria was the sole beneficiary of his estate. I know that too. What if she killed him? What if she killed them both, her husband and yours, to keep this secret? Clara's stomach turned. That's exactly what I was thinking. We need to go to Helena. Show these documents to the territorial marshal. This is bigger than Sheriff Peters. He's probably in Victoria's pocket anyway. Helena is 2 days' ride. Then we leave tomorrow morning. I can't leave my children that long, not with everything that's happening. Then we bring them. Elijah's voice was firm. All of them. We pack up tonight and leave at first light. I have contacts in Helena, people who owe me favors. They'll keep your family safe while we deal with this. Clara hesitated. Uprooting 5 children in the middle of winter, traveling through dangerous country, trusting strangers with their safety, every instinct screamed against it. But staying here, knowing what she now knew, waiting for Victoria or Daniel or whoever else to make their move, that seemed even more dangerous. All right, she said. We leave tomorrow. Good. Elijah tucked the papers into his own coat. I'll take these with me. They'll be safer at my ranch tonight. Why your ranch? Because no one's tried to kill me yet. His voice was grim. That means they don't know how much I know. The moment they realize you've found Thomas's evidence, you become a target. Clara's blood went cold. You think they'll come for me? I think Victoria Harding has killed before, probably twice. I think she's been waiting 3 years for you to give up and leave, and when that didn't work, she tried to take your land through the bank. Elijah's eyes met hers. And I think when she finds out you've discovered her secret, she'll do whatever it takes to silence you. Then why wait? Why not just... Clara couldn't finish the sentence. Because killing a widow with 5 children draws attention. She needed it to look natural, a foreclosure, a tragic loss, a family that simply couldn't survive the frontier. Elijah's jaw tightened. Victoria plays the long game, but when the game changes, so does she. Clara thought about Daniel, his visit yesterday, his warnings about Elijah, his insistence that she trust him instead. Do you think Daniel knows? I think Daniel has been Victoria's pawn for 3 years, whether he realizes it or not. Elijah paused. The question is whether he was involved in Thomas's death or whether he's just been useful to her afterward. He's been trying to marry me since the funeral. Of course he has. If he married you, the land would become his. Victoria could acquire it through him without raising suspicion. Clara felt sick. He's Thomas's brother. He baptized my children. He stood at my husband's grave and wept. Evil doesn't always look evil, Clara. Sometimes it looks like family. Sometimes it wears a preacher's collar. The words hit like stones. Clara wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold, despite her heavy coat. I trusted him. Not with everything, but I thought he cared. I thought his proposals came from genuine feeling, misguided as it was. Maybe they did. Maybe he convinced himself he loved you even while helping the woman who killed your husband. Elijah's voice softened slightly. People are complicated. They can hold contradictory things in their hearts and never see the conflict. Clara looked toward the house. Through the window she could see Josie's face, watching, waiting. My children have already lost their father. If Daniel was involved, if they find out their uncle helped kill their papa, they'll survive. They're strong, like their mother. I don't feel strong. That's how you know you are. Elijah touched her arm. Strong people feel their fear. They just don't let it stop them. Clara took a deep breath. Then another. The cold air burned her lungs, but it also steadied her. Tomorrow morning, she said. First light. First light. He climbed back onto his wagon, turned the horses, and drove toward the ridge. Clara watched until he disappeared, then walked back to the house to tell her children they were leaving their home. The news landed like a bomb. Leave? Sam's voice cracked with outrage. We can't leave. This is our home. Papa built this. I know, sweetheart. But we have to go to Helena for a little while. It's not forever. Why? What's happening? Clara looked at Josie, who gave a tiny nod. They'd agreed the older children needed to know at least part of the truth. There are people in this town who want to hurt us, who want to take our land. We need to get help from someone who can stop them." "What kind of people?" Maggie's voice was small, frightened. "Bad people. People who might have hurt your father." Silence fell over the kitchen. Even Ruthie stopped playing, sensing the tension. "I knew it," Sam said suddenly. "I knew Papa's death wasn't an accident. Horses don't just spook for no reason. Papa always said that." "You remember him saying that?" "I remember everything he said." Sam's chin trembled, but he didn't cry. "I wrote it down, in a journal, so I wouldn't forget." Clara's heart cracked open. Her 8-year-old son keeping a journal of his dead father's words, trying to hold on to something that kept slipping away. "That's very brave, sweetheart." "It's not brave, it's just true." Sam straightened his shoulders. "If we're going to Helena to find the people who hurt Papa, then I want to help." "Me too," Maggie said quietly. "And me," Josie added. Even Ellie nodded, though she didn't speak. Clara looked at her children, 4 fierce faces looking back at her, and Ruthie confused but trusting, clutching her rag doll. "All right," Clara said. "We do this together, as a family." "As a family," they echoed. The packing took hours. Clara had to decide what to bring and what to leave behind. Clothes were easy. Food for the journey. The children's most precious possessions. Thomas's journal and papers, which she'd hidden in her own clothes after Elijah left. She didn't trust anyone, not even Elijah, with everything. By nightfall, the wagon was loaded, and the children were exhausted. Clara sent them to bed early with strict instructions to sleep as long as possible. They'd be leaving before dawn. But sleep wouldn't come for Clara. She sat by the fire watching the flames dance, thinking about everything she knew and everything she didn't. Thomas's murder, the silver, Victoria's schemes, Daniel's possible involvement, and Elijah. She thought about him too, more than she wanted to admit. He'd appeared in her life a week ago, a stranger with convenient answers and mysterious motives. Every rational part of her brain said she should be suspicious, should question his story, should wonder why he was really helping her. But her heart said something different. Her heart said he was a man who'd made mistakes, who carried guilt like a physical weight, who was trying to atone for sins both real and imagined. Her heart said he looked at her children with genuine warmth. Her heart said he'd risked his own safety to protect a family he barely knew. Her heart was probably stupid, but her heart was all she had. A sound outside. Horses. More than one. Clara was on her feet, instantly reaching for Thomas's old rifle above the fireplace. She hadn't fired it in years, but she remembered how. Thomas had taught her. "Every frontier wife needs to know how to shoot," he'd said. "Pray you never have to." She moved to the window, staying in the shadows. 3 riders were approaching. In the moonlight, she could make out shapes, men heavily armed, moving with purpose. Not Elijah. His wagon was distinctive. These were strangers, or enemies. Clara's hands were steady as she checked the rifle. Loaded. Ready. "Josie," she called softly. Her daughter appeared instantly, already dressed. "I heard them." "Wake the others, quietly. Take them to the root cellar. Don't come out until I say." "Mama." "Now, Josephine." Josie ran. Clara heard soft sounds of movement, children waking, questions being hushed, footsteps on stairs. Then a knock at the door. "Mrs. Whitmore?" A man's voice. Unfamiliar. "We need to talk." Clara didn't answer. She pressed herself against the wall beside the window, rifle raised. "We know you're in there. We know you found Thomas's papers. Hand them over and nobody gets hurt." How did they know she'd only found them this morning? Only told Josie and Elijah. Elijah had taken the papers. Said he'd keep them safe. Had he betrayed her? No. She couldn't believe that. Wouldn't believe it. But someone had talked. Someone had told Victoria, it had to be Victoria, that the evidence had been found. "Last chance, Mrs. Whitmore. Give us the papers or we come in and take them." Clara thought fast. The papers Elijah had taken were copies Thomas had said so in his journal. One set goes to the bank vault in Helena. The other I'm hiding here. The originals were still in the house, in Clara's clothes, on her body. If these men searched the house, they'd find them, unless they never got the chance to search. Clara moved to the door, unbolted it, stepped back. "Come in then," she called. "Door's open." It swung inward. 3 men entered, guns drawn. The leader was tall-bearded with cold eyes that swept the room. "Smart woman," he said. "Now where are the papers?" "What papers?" "Don't play games." He gestured to his companions. "Search the house." "Search all you want. You won't find anything." The man studied her. "You're lying." "Am I?" Clara kept her voice steady. "My husband's papers went to Helena months ago. Sent them to a lawyer friend for safekeeping. Whatever you're looking for, it's not here." A flicker of doubt crossed his face. Mrs. Harding said, "Mrs. Harding is wrong. She's been wrong about a lot of things." The man's jaw tightened. "Search anyway." The other 2 spread out. Clara heard them tearing through the parlor, the kitchen. Heard furniture overturning glass, breaking papers, scattering. "If my children are hurt," she said quietly, "there's nowhere you'll be able to hide." "Your children are hiding in the root cellar. We saw them go in." The man smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "They'll stay there until we're done, long as you cooperate." "And if I don't?" "Then things get unpleasant." Clara's grip tightened on the rifle. She'd set it down when she opened the door, couldn't hold it, and looked non-threatening. But it was close, just a few feet away. "There's nothing here," one of the searchers called from upstairs. "No papers, no documents, nothing." The leader's face darkened. "You're sure? We've checked everywhere." He turned back to Clara. "Where are they?" "I told you, Helena." "You're lying. Prove it." His hand shot out and grabbed her arm. Clara didn't flinch. "Maybe I'll burn this house down with your children inside. See if that helps your memory." "Do that, and you'll never find the papers. I'm the only one who knows where they are." A standoff. Clara could see him calculating, weighing options. Kill her and lose the information. Let her live and risk exposure. "Mrs. Harding won't be happy," he said finally. "Mrs. Harding can go to hell." He released her arm. "This isn't over." "I expect not." They left. Clara stood frozen until the sound of hoofbeats faded into the distance. Then her legs gave out. She collapsed against the wall, shaking, gasping, tears streaming down her face. "Mama." Josie's voice came from the cellar door. "Are they gone?" "They're gone. You can come out." The children emerged, pale and frightened. Ruthie was crying. Ellie had gone completely silent. Sam looked like he wanted to kill someone. "Who were they?" Maggie whispered. "Bad men. Working for bad people." Clara forced herself to stand. "We're leaving now, not at dawn. Right now. It's the middle of the night." "I know. We'll ride to Mr. Dawson's ranch. We'll be safe there." "How do you know?" Clara thought about Elijah, about trust, about having nothing left but instinct and hope. "Because I believe him," she said, "and that's going to have to be enough." They loaded the wagon in darkness. Clara harnessed the horses with shaking hands. The children climbed into the back, wrapped in blankets, huddled together for warmth. She climbed onto the driver's seat, gathered the reins, and looked back at the house one last time. Thomas had built it. Thomas had died for it. Thomas had hidden his secrets within its walls. And now Clara was leaving it behind. "We'll come back," she whispered. "I promise." Then she snapped the reins and drove into the night. The ride to Dawson's ranch took an hour of darkness and cold and the constant fear that riders would appear behind them. An hour of Ruthie's soft crying and Ellie's terrible silence. An hour of praying that she'd made the right choice. When the ranch house finally appeared lit from within, Clara almost sobbed with relief. Elijah was on the porch before the wagon stopped. He must have been keeping watch. What happened? They came. Victoria's men. They were looking for the papers. Are you hurt? The children? We're fine. But they knew Elijah. They knew I'd found them. Someone told her. Elijah's face went hard. Not me. I didn't think, but you wondered. His voice was flat. You wondered if I'd betrayed you. Clara met his eyes. For a moment. Yes, I'm sorry. Don't apologize, you barely know me. Suspicion is smart. He reached up to help her down from the wagon. But I didn't tell anyone, which means someone else did. Who else knew? My housekeeper, Hattie. She saw the papers when I brought them in. But she's been with my family for 30 years. She'd die before betraying us. Then who? Elijah's jaw tightened. Someone was watching. Your house, my ranch, maybe both. They saw you searching this morning. Saw me arrive. Put the pieces together. Clara thought about the riders Thomas had mentioned in his journal. The watchers on the ridge. They hadn't stopped after his death. They'd simply become more careful. We're not safe, she said. Not anywhere. You're safe here. Tonight at least. Elijah was already helping the children down from the wagon. Tomorrow we leave for Helena. All of us. What about your ranch? Hattie will manage. She's handled worse. He lifted Ruthie into his arms. The toddler was half asleep, confused, reaching for her mother. Come inside. Get warm. We'll make a plan in the morning. Clara followed him into the house, her children clustering around her like frightened chicks. The ranch house was larger than she'd expected. Warm. Comfortable. A fire blazed in the hearth, and an older woman stood beside it. Hattie, presumably, her face creased with concern. Lord have mercy, Hattie said when she saw them. Look at these babies, half frozen and terrified. She moved immediately, gathering blankets, stirring something on the stove. You sit. All of you. I'll have food ready in 10 minutes. The children obeyed without protest. Even Sam, who normally resisted authority, sank into a chair and let Hattie wrap a blanket around his shoulders. Clara stood by the door too, wired to sit. Elijah appeared at her side. You did the right thing, coming here. Did I? I abandoned my home. You protected your children. That's never wrong. Thomas built that house. His blood is in those walls. Thomas would want you alive. He'd want his children safe. Elijah's voice was quiet but firm. Houses can be rebuilt. Families can't. Clara looked at her children. Josie was helping Hattie with the food, falling naturally into caretaker mode. Maggie had found a book somewhere and was reading to Ruthie, her soft voice filling the silence. Sam sat staring into the fire, his young face too old for 8 years. And Ellie was standing beside Elijah's chair, looking up at him with her huge, solemn eyes. You'll keep us safe, she asked, her first full sentence to a stranger since Thomas died. Elijah knelt down to her level. I'll keep you safe. Promise. Promise. Ellie nodded once, then walked to Clara and took her hand. I like him, Mama, she whispered. He tells the truth. Clara looked at Elijah. At this man who'd appeared in her life like a storm, upending everything, changing everything. Yes, sweetheart, she said softly. I think he does. They left before dawn. Elijah had prepared 2 wagons, one for Clara and the children, one loaded with supplies and driven by Hattie. He rode alongside on a horseback rifle across his saddle eyes, constantly scanning the horizon. How long to Helena? Josie asked from beside Clara on the driver's seat. 2 days if the weather holds. And if it doesn't? Clara didn't answer. They both knew what a winter storm could mean. The first hours passed in tense silence. The children huddled in the wagon bed wrapped in blankets, too tired and scared to talk. Even Ruthie had stopped asking questions, sensing the fear that crackled through the air like lightning before a storm. They'd been traveling maybe 4 hours when Elijah raised his hand. "Stop." Clara pulled the reins. "What is it?" "Riders, coming from the east." She squinted against the morning light. 3 shapes on the horizon, moving fast. "Victoria's men." "Can't tell yet." Elijah's hand moved to his rifle. "Get the children down. Behind the wagons." Clara didn't argue. "Josie, take your sisters and brother. Hide, now." The children scrambled out. Josie grabbed Ruthie. Sam took Ellie's hand. Maggie helped them all find cover behind the supply wagon. Hattie was already there. A shotgun Clara hadn't noticed held steady in her weathered hands. "I was shooting raiders before you were born," the old woman said when she saw Clara's surprise. "Don't worry about me." The riders grew closer. Clara's heart pounded against her ribs. Then Elijah lowered his rifle. "It's the sheriff, Peters and 2 deputies." Clara's stomach dropped. "You said Peters was probably in Victoria's pocket." "I said probably. Doesn't mean certainly." But Elijah's voice was tight. "Let me handle this." Sheriff Peters reined in his horse a few yards away. He was a heavy man, florid-faced with the look of someone who preferred comfort over confrontation. His deputies flanked him, hands near their weapons. "Mr. Dawson, Mrs. Whitmore." Peters tipped his hat. "Mind telling me where you're heading with half the county loaded into wagons?" "Personal business," Elijah said. "Last I checked, that wasn't a crime." "No, but fleeing a murder investigation is." Clara's blood went cold. "Murder investigation?" Elijah's voice was carefully neutral. "Reverend Daniel Whitmore was found dead this morning, in his church. Someone shot him twice in the chest." Peter's eyes moved to Clara. "You wouldn't know anything about that, would you, Mrs. Whitmore?" Clara couldn't speak. Daniel was dead. Thomas's brother. Her children's uncle. The man who might have helped kill her husband. Dead. "Mrs. Whitmore was at my ranch all night," Elijah said. "With her children. My housekeeper can confirm." "That's so." Peters looked at Hattie, who nodded firmly. "Convenient." "It's the truth." "Maybe. But there's also the matter of Mrs. Whitmore's house being torn apart last night. Neighbors heard noises, found the place ransacked this morning." Peters shifted in his saddle. "Care to explain that?" "3 men came to my home." Clara found her voice. "Armed men. They threatened me and my children. They were looking for documents related to my husband's death." "What documents?" "Evidence that Thomas was murdered. Evidence that Victoria Harding was behind it." Peter's face went carefully blank. "That's a serious accusation. It's a serious crime. You have proof." "I have my husband's journal, his letters, a geological survey showing silver deposits on our land, a survey conducted by Marcus Harding years before his death." Clara stepped forward. "I have proof that Victoria has been trying to steal my land for years. That she may have killed her own husband to keep the secret. That she almost certainly killed mine." The sheriff was quiet for a long moment. His deputies exchanged glances. "Mrs. Harding is a respected member of this community," Peters said finally. "She runs the bank, she donates to the church. She's a murderer. You got witnesses. Someone who saw her pull the trigger. I have documents, evidence, things Thomas hid before he died because he knew someone was going to kill him. Documents can be forged. They're not forged. That'll be for a court to decide." Peter straightened in his saddle. "In the meantime, I'm going to need you to come back to town. Answer some questions about the Reverend's death." "I told you she was with me all night," Elijah cut in. "And I told you that's convenient." Peter's hand moved to his pistol. "Now we can do this the easy way or the hard way. Your choice." Clara looked at Elijah. His jaw was tight, his eyes calculating. She could see him weighing options: fight, flee, comply. "If we go back," she said quietly, "Victoria wins. If we run, we look guilty. We are guilty. Guilty of knowing too much." "Mama," Josie's voice came from behind the wagon. "What's happening?" Clara's heart cracked. Her children. Always her children. Every decision she made had to be for them. "It's all right, sweetheart. Stay hidden." "Mrs. Whitmore." Peter's voice hardened. "I'm not asking again." Clara made a decision. "Fine. We'll come back. But I want it on record that I'm cooperating voluntarily, and I want my children kept safe while I answer your questions." "Your children can stay at the hotel. Mrs. Henderson will look after them." "They'll stay with Mrs. Crane." Clara nodded toward Hattie. "She's the only one I trust." Peters shrugged. "Makes no difference to me, long as you come quietly." Clara climbed back onto the wagon seat. Her hands were steady, but her mind was racing. Daniel was dead. Victoria's men had come for her last night. And now the sheriff, probably corrupt, definitely suspicious, was taking her back to the town where her enemies held all the power. She was walking into a trap. But what choice did she have? The ride back to Silver Creek took 3 hours. 3 hours of silence and dread. 3 hours of watching Elijah ride alongside his face unreadable. 3 hours of listening to her children whisper among themselves, too scared to speak aloud. When they reached town, Clara saw immediately that something had changed. People lined the streets, not the usual morning bustle. This was something else. Faces at windows, clusters on corners, all of them watching, whispering, pointing. "What's going on?" Clara asked. "News travels fast," Peters said grimly. "The Reverend was well loved. And I'm the outsider who didn't mourn him properly." "You said it, not me." The sheriff's office was small, cramped, smelling of tobacco and old coffee. Peters gestured to a chair, and Clara sat. "Now then," he settled behind his desk. "Tell me about last night, from the beginning." Clara told him, the men who came, their threats, her escape to Elijah's ranch. She left out the documents. Something told her Peters already knew about them, or at least suspected. "And you didn't see who killed the Reverend." "I told you I was at the Dawson Ranch." "All night." "All night." Peters leaned back. "Here's the thing, Mrs. Whitmore. Daniel Whitmore was shot with a rifle. Same caliber as the one you keep above your fireplace." Clara's stomach dropped. "How do you know what rifle I keep?" "I've been to your house, after your husband's funeral, paid my respects." "That rifle hasn't been fired in years." "So you say. But funny thing, when my deputies searched your house this morning, they couldn't find it." Clara went cold. The rifle. She'd picked it up last night when Victoria's men came. Had she put it back? She couldn't remember. Everything after that was a blur of fear and flight. Someone must have taken it. Someone. Peter's voice was flat. Convenient. "I didn't kill Daniel." "Maybe not. But someone did. Someone with access to your rifle. Someone who knew how to use it." He leaned forward. "Someone who might have reason to want the Reverend dead." Clara's mind raced. Victoria. It had to be Victoria. She'd sent men to Clara's house, they'd found the rifle, and then... "She's framing me," Clara breathed. "Victoria Harding is framing me for Daniel's murder." "That's quite an accusation." "It's the truth. She's been trying to destroy me for years. First Thomas, now this." Clara gripped the arms of her chair. "Don't you see? She killed Daniel because he knew too much. Because he was becoming a liability. And she's using my rifle to point the blame at me." Peters was quiet for a long moment. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said finally, "I'm going to be honest with you. I've known Victoria Harding for 15 years. She's hard, yes. Ambitious, certainly. But a murderer?" He shook his head. "That's a stretch." "Then how do you explain my husband's death? How do you explain the documents he hid? How do you explain? I can't explain any of it. That's not my job. Peters stood. My job is to keep the peace in this town, and right now you're disturbing that peace. So you're going to arrest me for a murder I didn't commit. I'm going to hold you for questioning until we sort this out. He moved toward the door. Your children will be taken care of. Mr. Dawson can wait outside if he wants, but you're not going anywhere until I say so. The cell was small and cold. Clara sat on the narrow bunk staring at the wall trying to think. Victoria had outmaneuvered her. Killed Daniel, stolen her rifle, set her up to take the blame. By the time Clara could prove her innocence, if she could prove it, Victoria would have destroyed the documents, bought off any witnesses, and secured the land she'd been after for years. It was almost elegant, almost admirable, if it wasn't so evil. The cell door clanged. Clara looked up. Elijah stood in the corridor, his face half-shadowed. I bribed the deputy, he said quietly. We have 5 minutes. To do what I'm locked in here. To talk. To plan. He moved closer to the bars. Clara, listen to me. Victoria is making her move. Right now. She's probably at your ranch already searching for whatever Thomas hid. She won't find it. I have the most important documents on me. She doesn't know that. She'll tear the place apart looking. Elijah's voice was urgent. But that's not the real problem. The real problem is that she's got the sheriff, she's got the town, and she's got you exactly where she wants you. I know. Clara's voice was bitter. I walked right into her trap. We both did. I should have seen this coming. He gripped the bars. But it's not over. Hattie is with the children, she'll keep them safe. I've sent a rider to Helena with copies of the documents. Even if something happens to us, the truth will get out. Copies? I thought I had the only copies. Thomas made 3 sets. One for the Helena Bank vault, one hidden in your house, and one he gave to my father years ago. Elijah's eyes met hers. My father kept them. I found them after he died. I've had them this whole time. Clara stared at him. You had proof all along. I had documents. Without testimony, without context, they're just papers. I needed you to find Thomas's journal, to understand the whole picture. His voice softened. And I needed you to trust me. That doesn't happen overnight. You could have told me. Would you have believed me? A stranger showing up with papers about your dead husband's secrets. Clara thought about it. A week ago she would have thrown him off her property, called him a con man or worse. No, she admitted. I wouldn't have. That's why I waited. Played the long game. His mouth twisted. Apparently Victoria plays longer. Footsteps in the corridor. Elijah stepped back. The deputy's coming back. I have to go. Elijah? I'm not leaving. Whatever happens, I'm not leaving. His eyes burned into hers. Trust me, Clara. One more time. Can you do that? Clara looked at this man who'd turned her life upside down, who'd given her hope and danger in equal measure, who'd stood between her and destruction again and again. Yes, she said. I trust you. He nodded once. Then he was gone. Clara sat alone in her cell and waited for whatever came next. It came faster than she expected. Victoria Harding arrived at the sheriff's office just before sunset. Clara heard her voice first, that honey-sweet tone that had always made her skin crawl, and then the click of expensive heels on wooden floors. Sheriff Peters, I came as soon as I heard. Mrs. Harding, this isn't a good time. Nonsense. A man of God has been murdered. The whole town is in shock. The least I can do is offer my support. A pause. And I understand you have Mrs. Whitmore in custody, for questioning only. Of course. Though I must say the evidence seems quite damning. Her rifle, her motive. What motive? Peters's voice was suspicious. Everyone knows Daniel was courting her, pressing her to marry him. Perhaps she grew tired of his attention. Victoria's voice dripped false sympathy. Grief does strange things to people. Clara couldn't stay silent any longer. "I didn't kill Daniel," she called from her cell. "You did. Or you had him killed. Just like you killed my husband." Footsteps. Victoria appeared at the cell door, her face a mask of concern that didn't reach her eyes. "Mrs. Whitmore, how awful for you. Locked up like a common criminal." "I know what you did." Clara's voice was steady. "I found Thomas's journal, his documents, the surveys Marcus conducted. You've been planning this for years." "I'm sure I don't know what you mean." "You killed your husband. You killed mine. And now you've killed Daniel because he knew too much, or because he was no longer useful." Clara gripped the bars. "You're a murderer, Victoria, and I'm going to prove it." Victoria's mask slipped. Just for a second, Clara saw what was underneath: cold calculation, ruthless ambition, complete absence of remorse. Then the mask was back. "Poor dear. The stress has clearly affected your mind." Victoria turned to Peters. "Sheriff, perhaps Mrs. Whitmore would be better served in a more secure facility. For her own protection, of course." "Now hold on," Peters started. "The Territorial Asylum in Warm Springs, perhaps. They specialize in hysterical women." Clara's blood turned to ice. The asylum, where inconvenient people disappeared, where the truth went to die. "You can't do that," Clara said. "You have no authority." "I have considerable authority in this town, Mrs. Whitmore. Surely you've noticed by now." Victoria's smile was sharp as a blade. "The bank holds mortgages on half the properties in Silver Creek. The sheriff's salary comes from town funds I control. The judge who would hear your case is a personal friend." "Peters," Clara turned to the sheriff. "You can't let her do this. Whatever she's paying you, whatever she's promised." "Mrs. Whitmore, I think you should stop talking now. She's a murderer." "That's enough." Peters's voice hardened. "Mrs. Harding, I appreciate your concern, but Mrs. Whitmore isn't going anywhere until we complete our investigation." Victoria's eyes narrowed. "I hope you're not suggesting you doubt my word, Sheriff. I'm suggesting this is my jurisdiction, and I'll handle it my way." The tension between them crackled. Clara watched, barely breathing. Peters might be corrupt, but he was also proud. Victoria had pushed too hard, too fast. "Of course." Victoria's voice cooled. "I have complete faith in your abilities." She turned back to Clara. "Enjoy your evening, Mrs. Whitmore. I suspect things will look very different in the morning." She swept out without another word. Peters stood frozen for a moment. Then he moved to Clara's cell. "Those documents you mentioned, the journal, the surveys, where are they?" Clara hesitated. Peters was probably in Victoria's pocket, but he'd just pushed back against her. Maybe there was more to him than she'd thought. "Safe," she said carefully. "Not somewhere Victoria can reach." "Can you prove what you're claiming about your husband's death?" "Yes, I can prove everything." Peters was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was different. Tired. Troubled. "I've been sheriff of this town for 12 years. I've looked the other way on things I shouldn't have, taken money I shouldn't have taken." He met her eyes. "But murder. That's different. That's the line I won't cross." "Then help me." "How?" "Let me out. Let me get to Helena with my evidence. Let me talk to someone who isn't in Victoria's pocket. If I let you out and you're wrong, I'm not wrong. Or if you run, I won't run. My children are here. Everything I love is here." Clara pressed against the bars. "Please, you're the only chance I have." Peters stared at her. The moment stretched unbearably. Then he reached for his keys. "God help me if this is a mistake." He unlocked the cell. Clara stepped out, hardly believing it. "Elijah Dawson is waiting outside," Peters said. "He wouldn't leave. Threatened to tear this building down if I didn't let him see you." "That sounds like him." "He also gave me copies of your husband's documents, said I should look them over." Peters's jaw tightened. "I looked. I saw Marcus Harding's survey. I saw the letters." He met her eyes. "I knew Marcus. He was a good man. Too good for Victoria. I always wondered why he died in that mine. Now you know. Now I suspect. Knowing and suspecting are different things. He moved toward the door. Go. Get to Helena. Bring back someone with authority to investigate properly. What will you tell Victoria? That you escaped, knocked me out, and took my keys. His mouth twisted. She won't believe it, but she can't prove otherwise. Clara touched his arm. Why? Why help me now? Because I'm tired. His voice was heavy. Tired of looking the other way. Tired of pretending I don't see what's right in front of me. He glanced toward the street. My wife died 2 years ago. Cancer. She told me on her deathbed that she was ashamed of me, that I'd become something she didn't recognize. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Be right. He opened the door. Go, before I change my mind. Elijah was waiting with the horses. Clara ran to him, and for one moment, one perfect moment, she let herself collapse against his chest, let his arms come around her, let herself feel safe. I thought I'd lost you, he murmured against her hair. Not yet. Never. He pulled back his hands on her shoulders. Helena, now, before Victoria realizes what's happened. The children? Hattie has them. They're safe. He helped her onto a horse. Ride hard. Don't stop for anything. You're not coming. I'll be right behind you. I need to do something first. Elijah, trust me. He met her eyes. One more time. Can you do that? Clara looked at him. At this man who'd given her everything. Hope. Truth. A future she'd stopped believing in. Always, she said. She rode into the darkness and didn't look back. The Helena road was treacherous in winter, but Clara pushed her horse as hard as she dared. Every shadow could be Victoria's men. Every sound could be pursuit. She rode with her heart in her throat and Thomas's documents against her chest. Dawn was breaking when she finally saw the city lights. Helena was bigger than Silver Creek, a real town with a territorial government, a federal marshal's office, newspapers that reported actual news. If she could get to the right people, tell the right story, show the right evidence, Victoria would finally pay. Clara rode straight to the marshal's office. Her legs nearly buckled when she dismounted. She'd been in the saddle for hours, frozen and exhausted, running on nothing but fear and determination. The deputy at the desk looked up when she burst through the door. I need to speak to Marshal Crawford. It's urgent. Marshal's not here. Won't be back until... Then whoever's in charge, please, lives are at stake. Something in her voice must have convinced him. He disappeared into a back room and returned moments later with a tall, gray-haired man in a federal uniform. I'm Deputy Marshal Harrison. What's this about? Clara told him everything. The documents, the murders, Victoria Harding's conspiracy, Sheriff Peters letting her go, the danger to her children, all of it pouring out in a desperate flood of words and evidence. Harrison listened without interrupting. When she finished, he examined the documents for a long, silent moment. If this is true, he said finally, it's one of the most significant cases of fraud and murder in territorial history. It's true. Every word. You have witnesses. Elijah Dawson, his housekeeper Hattie Crane, Sheriff Peters if he's willing to testify. Clara hesitated. And there may be others, people in Silver Creek who suspected but were too afraid to speak. And Mrs. Harding, she's still there, still acting freely. As far as I know. Harrison stood. I'm going to need to send men to Silver Creek immediately. If she suspects you've reached us, she might run. Or worse, destroy evidence, eliminate witnesses. Clara's blood chilled. My children are there. Then we move fast. Harrison was already reaching for his coat. I'll assemble a team. We ride within the hour. I'm coming with you. Ma'am, that's not advisable. Those are my children. My home. My husband she murdered. Clara's voice was steel. I'm coming. Harrison studied her for a moment. Then he nodded. Get some food. Rest if you can. We leave at first light. Clara didn't rest. She couldn't. She sat by the window watching the sky lighten, praying that Elijah had kept her children safe. Praying that Victoria hadn't discovered Peters's betrayal. Praying that this nightmare was finally almost over. At dawn, they rode. The ride back to Silver Creek felt like a lifetime. Clara pushed her horse harder than she should have, but the marshal's men kept pace. 12 federal deputies, armed and grim-faced, riding to bring justice to a town that had forgotten what the word meant. They were still an hour out when they saw the smoke. Clara's heart stopped. Black columns rose against the gray sky, thick and angry, billowing from somewhere near the center of town. That's coming from Main Street, Harrison said. Clara didn't wait for orders. She kicked her horse into a gallop, leaving the deputies behind, racing toward the fire with only one thought in her mind. Her children. The town was chaos when she arrived. People ran through the streets with buckets and blankets, shouting over each other, trying to organize a response to the blaze. The general store was burning flames, leaping from the roof, smoke pouring from every window. Clara scanned the crowd desperately. Josie, Maggie, Sam, Ellie, Ruthie. Where were they? Clara. She spun. Hattie was running toward her, face streaked with soot, eyes wild with relief. The children. Safe. They're safe. I got them out. Hattie grabbed her arm. Elijah took them to the church. Victoria's men set the fire to create a distraction, but we saw them coming. Where is Victoria? Bank. She's been locked in there since last night. Word got out about what she did. I don't know how, but everyone knows now. She's trapped. Clara looked toward the bank. A crowd had gathered outside, their faces hard with anger. These were people Victoria had manipulated, stolen from, terrorized for years. Now they'd learned the truth, and they wanted blood. The marshal's men are right behind me, Clara said. They'll handle Victoria. I need to see my children. Go, I'll tell them where you are. Clara ran for the church. The building stood untouched by the fire, its white steeple rising against the smoke-dark sky. Clara burst through the doors and stopped. Her children were huddled in the front pew. All 5 of them, alive, safe. And sitting beside them, rifle across his knees, was Elijah. Mama! Ruthie saw her first. The 3-year-old launched herself down the aisle, and Clara dropped to her knees just in time to catch her. Mama, there was fire and scary men, and Mr. Eli made them go away. I know, sweetheart, I know. The others came running. Josie and Maggie and Sam and Ellie, all of them piling onto Clara in a desperate tangle of arms and tears. I thought you were gone, Josie sobbed. They said Victoria had you locked up. They said, I'm here. I'm right here. Clara held them as tight as she could. It's over. It's finally over. Is it? Sam's voice was muffled against her shoulder. Is Victoria really going to jail? Yes. The federal marshal is here. He has all the evidence he needs. What about Uncle Daniel? Maggie asked. Mrs. Hattie said he's dead. Clara's throat tightened. Yes. Uncle Daniel is dead. Did Victoria kill him too? We think so. Maggie was quiet for a moment. Then, he wasn't a good man, was he, Uncle Daniel? He pretended to be, but he wasn't. Clara looked at her 10-year-old daughter with her poet's heart and her 2 wise eyes. I don't know, sweetheart. I think he was complicated. I think he made bad choices for what he thought were good reasons. That's not an excuse. No, it isn't. Elijah appeared beside them. He'd set down his rifle and stood waiting, his face unreadable. The marshal's men are at the bank, he said. They're taking Victoria into custody. Clara stood, keeping Ruthie in her arms. I want to see. Clara. I need to see. She met his eyes. I need to watch her face the consequences. For Thomas. For everything. Elijah nodded slowly. Then we'll go together. They walked through the still chaotic streets, Clara's children surrounding her like a protective wall. People stopped to stare. Some called out words of support, expressions of sympathy, apologies for doubting her. Clara barely heard them. All she could see was the bank. The doors stood open. Federal deputies lined the entrance, and in the center of the chaos, hands bound behind her back face, twisted with fury, stood Victoria Harding. She saw Clara approaching, and her expression changed. The fury gave way to something cold and calculating. "Mrs. Whitmore." Her voice carried across the crowd. "Come to gloat." Clara stopped a few feet away. "I came to ask you something." "Ask, then." "Why? You had money, power, everything you could want. Why wasn't it enough?" Victoria laughed. It was an ugly sound. "You think money is power. You think influence is enough." She shook her head. "Power is control, Mrs. Whitmore. Control over land resources people. Your husband stood in the way of that. So did mine. You killed them, both of them. I removed obstacles." Victoria's eyes glittered. "Marcus was weak. He wanted to share the discovery, bring in partners, let everyone profit from the silver. I couldn't allow that. And Thomas?" Her lip curled. "Thomas was an idealist. He actually believed hard work and integrity would be rewarded, as if the world worked that way." Clara felt the rage building inside her, hot and terrible and righteous. 3 years of grief, 3 years of struggle, 3 years of fighting to keep her children alive, never knowing the truth. "You destroyed my family. I inconvenienced your family. You're still standing, aren't you?" Victoria glanced at the children. "They're still breathing. I'd call that a victory." Clara stepped forward, her hands curled into fists. "Clara." Elijah's voice came low and warning. "Don't. She killed Thomas. She killed Daniel. She tried to kill me. And she'll pay for it, in a court, with witnesses and evidence and a judge who can't be bought." He moved to stand beside her. "Don't give her the satisfaction of breaking you now." Clara looked at Victoria, at the woman who had taken everything from her, at the monster wearing expensive clothes and a respectable face. "You're right," Clara said quietly. "She's not worth it." Victoria's mask cracked. Just for a second, Clara saw surprise and something that might have been fear. "Take her," Deputy Marshal Harrison ordered. The deputies moved forward. Victoria was led away, still straight-backed, still proud, still refusing to show weakness. But Clara had seen it. That moment of doubt. That flash of understanding that her power was finally irreversibly gone. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was something. The trial took 3 weeks. Clara testified for 4 hours, her voice steady, her evidence irrefutable. Thomas's journal was entered into record. The geological surveys were examined by experts. Witness after witness came forward. People Victoria had intimidated, people who'd suspected, but been too afraid to speak, people who wanted to finally tell the truth. Sheriff Peters testified too. He confessed to taking bribes, to looking the other way, to helping Victoria maintain her grip on Silver Creek. In exchange for his testimony, he was allowed to resign quietly rather than face charges. Clara didn't know how she felt about that, but Harrison said it was the price of getting Victoria convicted. The jury deliberated for 2 days. Clara sat in the courtroom, her children in the gallery behind her, Elijah at her side. She'd barely slept since the trial began. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Thomas, heard his voice, felt the weight of everything she'd lost. When the foreman stood to read the verdict, Clara's heart nearly stopped. "On the charge of murder in the first degree for the death of Thomas Whitmore, we find the defendant guilty." Clara's breath caught. "On the charge of murder in the first degree for the death of Marcus Harding, we find the defendant guilty." Josie grabbed Clara's hand, squeezed hard. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder for the death of Reverend Daniel Whitmore, we find the defendant guilty. Victoria's face went white. For the first time since her arrest, she looked truly afraid. On the charge of fraud and attempted theft of property, we find the defendant guilty. Clara was crying. She didn't know when she'd started, but tears streamed down her face and she couldn't stop them. The defendant will be remanded to territorial custody until sentencing. This court is adjourned. The gavel fell. It was over. Clara sat frozen as the courtroom erupted around her. People talking, moving, celebrating. Victoria being led away in chains, her perfect composure finally shattered. "Mama!" Ruthie's small voice cut through the noise. "Are you happy now?" Clara turned to look at her youngest daughter. 3 years old. Too young to understand what had happened. Too young to know that her father had been murdered by the woman now being marched to prison. "I'm not happy, sweetheart," Clara said honestly. "But I'm relieved. There's a difference." "What's the difference?" "Happy is when something good happens. Relieved is when something bad finally stops happening." Ruthie considered this with the solemn intensity of a toddler. "Oh, okay." She held up her arms. "Can we go home now?" Clara lifted her daughter and held her close. Home. Their ranch. The land Thomas had built and bled and died for. "Yes, sweetheart. We can go home." The ride back to Silver Creek was different this time. No fear, no urgency, no looking over her shoulder for enemies. Just Clara and her children and Elijah traveling through winter country that suddenly felt less hostile. The sky was clearing. The sun broke through clouds for the first time in days. "It's pretty," Maggie said from the wagon bed. "The snow. It's actually pretty when you're not scared of it." "Everything's prettier when you're not scared," Josie said. But she was smiling. Sam had been quiet most of the trip. Now he spoke up. "Mr. Eli." Elijah turned in his saddle. "Yeah. Are you going to stay in Silver Creek, I mean, now that the trial's over?" Clara's heart clenched. She'd been wondering the same thing, afraid to ask, afraid of the answer. Elijah was quiet for a long moment. Then he looked at Clara. "That depends," he said, "on whether I'm wanted." "You're wanted," Sam said immediately. "You can teach me to shoot and help with the horses and—" "I think Mr. Eli was asking Mama," Josie interrupted. "Not you." Sam's face fell. "Oh." Clara met Elijah's eyes. In them she saw everything he wasn't saying. The question, the hope, the fear of rejection. "You're wanted," she said softly. "More than you know." Something shifted in his face. That careful blankness cracked, revealing something warm and wondering underneath. "Then I'm staying." Ruthie cheered. Maggie clapped her hands. Even Ellie smiled a real smile that transformed her solemn face. Sam crossed his arms, trying to look tough. "Good, because I wasn't going to learn shooting from anyone else anyway." Clara laughed. It surprised her she couldn't remember the last time she'd laughed without pain underneath. "Let's go home," she said. "All of us." The ranch looked different in daylight. Victoria's men had searched it, torn through it, tried to destroy it. But the bones were good. That's what Clara kept telling herself. The bones were good. It would take work. Months of work, maybe years, but they could rebuild. "It's a mess," Josie said, standing in the doorway of the ransacked house. "Yes, but it's our mess." "Yes." Josie turned to look at her mother. "We can fix it. Together." Clara pulled her daughter close. "Yes, sweetheart. We can." The children scattered to assess damage and salvage what they could. Clara walked through the house slowly, touching walls Thomas had built, stepping over debris from a life that felt like 100 years ago. In the study, she stopped. The floorboard was still up, the hiding spot where Thomas had kept his secrets. Empty now, his documents were in. Helena entered into evidence protected by law. But something caught her eye. a glint of metal in the corner, half hidden by fallen papers. Clara knelt and reached for it. Her fingers closed around something small and warm. Thomas's wedding ring. She'd buried him without it. Couldn't find it anywhere after his death. Assumed it had been lost or stolen. But here it was, hidden with his other secrets, as if he'd known she would find it. As if he'd wanted her to have this piece of him after everything else was revealed. Clara clutched the ring to her chest and wept. She didn't know how long she sat there. Long enough for the light to change, for the afternoon to soften into evening. Long enough for the tears to run dry. When she finally stood, Elijah was in the doorway. "The children are worried about you." "I'm all right." She wiped her face. "I found Thomas's ring. I thought it was lost." Elijah didn't ask questions. He just nodded. "You going to wear it?" Clara looked at the ring in her palm. Simple gold, worn from years of hard work. Thomas's hands had worn this every day of their marriage. "No," she said finally. "I'm going to give it to Josie. She should have something of his, something to remember." "That's a good idea." Clara tucked the ring into her pocket and took a deep breath. "Help me clean up. Always." They worked side by side until dark. The children helped even Ruthie, who mostly moved debris from one pile to another. By nightfall, the house was livable again. Not perfect, but livable. Hattie arrived with food and blankets. She'd appointed herself honorary grandmother to Clara's children, and none of them minded in the least. "You'll stay for supper," Clara said. "Both of you." "I never turn down a meal," Hattie replied. "Especially one I don't have to cook." They ate together around the kitchen table. 8 people where there used to be 6. Different faces, different voices. But somehow, against all odds, still a family. After supper, the children drifted toward sleep. Exhaustion had caught up with them, the trial, the travel, the emotional whiplash of the past weeks. One by one, they settled into beds and blankets, their soft breathing filling the house with peace. Clara stood on the porch, watching the stars emerge. Elijah appeared beside her, silent as always. "Thank you," she said without looking at him. "For everything." "You don't have to thank me." "Yes, I do. You saved us. You believed us when no one else would. You fought for us when you had nothing to gain." "That's not true." Clara turned to look at him. "What do you mean?" Elijah was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough with something she couldn't quite name. "The first time I saw you, you were walking through town with groceries in your arms. Your coat was too thin for the weather. Your boots were held together with prayer and stubbornness. And you were smiling at something one of your children had said, laughing even." Clara didn't remember that day. There had been so many days like it. "I thought," Elijah continued, "there's someone who refuses to break. Someone who keeps going no matter what. And I wondered what that felt like, being that strong, having something worth being strong for." "I'm not strong. I've told you that. And I've told you stubborn is the same thing." He turned to face her fully. "Clara, I came here to settle my father's affairs, to close out his life and move on. I didn't expect to find anything worth staying for. And now I can't imagine leaving." His hand found hers in the darkness. "I know it's too soon. I know you've been through hell. I know you might not ever—" "Elijah." He stopped. "Stop talking," Clara said, "and kiss me." He did. It wasn't like the kisses in Maggie's storybooks, perfect and romantic and set against a sunset. It was awkward and uncertain and tasted like tears and coffee. It was exactly right. When they finally broke apart, Clara was laughing. "What?" Elijah looked almost wounded. "Nothing. Everything." She shook her head. "A month ago, I was about to lose my home. I thought my husband died in an accident. I hadn't laughed, really laughed in 3 years. And now I have answers, justice, a future." She squeezed his hand. "And someone to share it with." "Is that what I am? Someone to share with?" "You're more than that." Clara met his eyes. "You're the man who gave me back my hope." Elijah was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled her close and held her against his chest. "I'm not Thomas," he said quietly. I'll never be him. I don't want you to be him. Clara looked up at him. I want you to be you. The grumpy rancher who showed up at my door with a business proposition and ended up saving my life. I'm not grumpy. You're extremely grumpy. The children have noticed. The children think I'm wonderful. The children think you're wonderful and grumpy. It's possible to be both. Elijah laughed. The sound was rusty, like something that hadn't been used in years. But it was real. I love you, he said. I know that's fast. I know we barely know each other. But I love you, Clara Whitmore. I think I have since the moment I saw you refuse to break. Clara's heart felt like it might burst. I love you too, she whispered. And I'm done being alone. Spring came slowly to Montana. The snow melted in patches, revealing brown grass and dormant earth. Creeks swelled with runoff. Birds returned from wherever birds went when winter drove them away. And on the Whitmore ranch, life was beginning again. Clara stood on the porch watching her children play in the muddy yard. Josie was reading to Ruthie on the steps Thomas's poetry book, the one Maggie had carried like a talisman. Sam was helping Elijah repair the fence, learning to use tools with the careful concentration of a boy becoming a man. Maggie and Ellie were collecting the first wildflowers of spring, making crowns for their hair. It wasn't perfect. Nothing ever was. But it was good. Hattie came out with coffee, settling into the rocking chair Clara had salvaged from the wreckage of Victoria's search. You look happy, the old woman observed. I am happy. About time. Hattie sipped her coffee. You know, I've seen a lot of things in my 60 years. Wars and droughts and people at their very worst. But I've also seen this families coming back together, broken people learning to heal. Does it always work out? No. Sometimes the broken stay broken. Sometimes the wounds are too deep. Hattie looked at her with knowing eyes. But sometimes if people are brave enough and stubborn enough and lucky enough, they find their way through to the other side. Clara watched Elijah lift Sam onto his shoulders so the boy could reach a high nail. Her son was laughing, really laughing the way he used to before Thomas died. I think we're going to be okay, she said. I know you are. Hattie patted her arm. You were always going to be okay, Clara. You just needed to believe it. The wedding was small, just family, just the people who mattered. Clara wore her mother's dress carefully preserved through years of hardship. Elijah wore the same suit he'd worn to his father's funeral, but somehow it looked different now, hopeful instead of grieving. Josie stood as Clara's witness. Sam stood as Elijah's. Do you, Clara May Whitmore, take this man to be your husband? Clara looked at Elijah, at his tired eyes and his crooked smile and the gray at his temples, at the man who'd ridden into her life like a storm and stayed to help her rebuild. I do. Do you, Elijah James Dawson, take this woman to be your wife? I do. His voice was steady. I always will. Then by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. The children cheered. Hattie wept. And somewhere, Clara liked to think Thomas was smiling, because that was the thing about love. It didn't end when people died. It just changed shape, found new places to grow, new hearts to fill. Thomas would always be her first love, the father of her children, the man who built her a home. But Elijah was her future, her second chance, her proof that hope was worth holding on to even when everything seemed lost. They walked out of the church together, 5 children surrounding them, the Montana sun warm on their faces. What now? Elijah asked. Clara looked at her family, her beautiful, complicated, impossible family, built from loss and stubbornness and the refusal to give up. Now, she said, we live. Years later, when people asked Clara Whitmore Dawson how she'd survived those terrible months, the foreclosure, the conspiracy, the discovery that her husband had been murdered, she always gave the same answer. I didn't survive alone. No one does. I survived because I had children who needed me, a man who believed in me, and friends who refused to let me fall. But what about Victoria Harding? They'd ask. Weren't you scared of her? I was terrified, every day. But fear isn't the opposite of courage. Fear is what makes courage possible. You can't be brave if you're not afraid. Do you ever think about her? About what she did? Clara would pause then. Consider the question carefully. I think about Thomas. I think about what we lost and what we found. I think about my children growing up strong and kind and unbroken. She'd smile. But Victoria Harding, no. She took enough from me. I won't give her my memories too. Victoria died in prison 7 years after her conviction. Clara didn't attend the funeral. But that night, she and Elijah sat on the porch, watching their children older, now spreading their wings, becoming the people they were always meant to be. And she felt something release, some final lingering weight she hadn't known she was still carrying. It's over, she said. It's really finally over. Elijah took her hand. It was over the day we chose to move forward instead of looking back. Clara leaned against his shoulder. The Montana sky stretched endless above them, full of stars Thomas used to name for her on summer nights. I miss him, she said quietly. Even now, even after everything. I know. But I'm not sorry, for any of it. Not for surviving, not for loving you, not for building this life. Neither am I. Ruthie, 15 now, beautiful, fierce, appeared in the doorway. Mama, Papa, supper's ready. Papa. She called Elijah that now, had for years. It had started as Mr. Eli, then Eli, then one day without discussion, Papa. Clara never asked her about it. Some things didn't need words. Coming, sweetheart? They rose together hand in hand and walked into the warm light of the home they'd built from the ashes of the old. Behind them, the stars wheeled in their eternal dance, indifferent to the struggles and triumphs of the small lives below. But Clara didn't mind their indifference anymore. She had her children. She had her husband. She had the truth about Thomas and the justice he deserved. She had everything that mattered. And in the end, that was more than enough. In the end, it was everything.